Hello everyone, the Victoria is here, and in the past I modeled this plastic pen holder in FreeCAD, and I would like to compare the process what I used with FreeCAD with the process I use in Conjure SDF to model things. Because in my opinion the principles are kind of similar, because in FreeCAD basically you are using booleans as well to create the final shape, just like in Conjure SDF. So let's see how we can create this with Conjure SDF, comparing what I do in FreeCAD. So I use the part design workbench for this one, and let's switch back to the beginning. Obviously, FreeCAD is a CAD software, so you should create sketches. In this case, my sketch here is just this basic rectangle shape with the base dimension of this pen holder, and basically I extruded it. The extrude operation called the pad in FreeCAD. So I created a 56 millimeter extrusion. However, I tapered this angle. So if you look at the front, you can see that this angle is tapered. And also it's tapered at the side as well. So let's see how can we recreate this with Conjure SDF. So what we should do in CSDF is to add a CSDF root and switch on Conjure Vision. I am going to start with my favorite red matcap. And by the way, I do apologize if my voice is a bit strange in this recording. I catch some cold, nothing too serious, but it might affect my voice. So let's add one might think that this trapezoid prism might be a good option. However, there is a problem with it. Let me drag the Conjure SDF at the top. We can specify the bottom width and the top width. However, the bottom length and top length, I cannot make any difference. The pyramid is not good either, because I cannot make, so this is kind of like a square based shape. So we have to have a cube. And for now, I am going to turn off the bevel and this blending. So we need, and also I would like to switch the units to millimeters in order to make sure that the conversion is easy. So I need a 264 at the X and 134 at the Y, and the height is the 56, just like the FreeCAD version, because I am going to model this up to scale. However, as you can see, this looks horrible here. So we have to adjust the viewport. We are not going to watch this at this far. 1 meter is fine. The minimum distance, however, let it be 0.5 millimeters. As you can see, this gives us quite a nice sharp edges. I'm I am not going to adjust the maximum step and the ray scale for the time being. And since I cannot do the taper the way I wanted, I have to duplicate this, and let's make it a bit wider, and let's turn off this move widget and higher, and I have to rotate it by 5 degrees around the y-axis, and let me make it a bit smaller. We don't need this big shape, and we have to make it a negative shape, and let's try to position it such way that it just cuts off what it needed to cut off. Let's duplicate it around the x-axis, and this one is, the position is this. We have to have the minus position, and the degrees is 5 degrees. So now we have to duplicate this one more time, and make sure that this is at the 0 angle. Let's zero this out, and let's make wide like so, and maybe a bit smaller. And let's rotate this time around the x-axis by okay, this should be the 5 degrees. And yet again, let's make it 0 at the x-axis, the position. And now I think let's adjust this accordingly. So let's copy this y value, and let's shift this along the y-axis, and now I have this tapered cube shape for the base shape now. However, what I want to do is, let's select all of these guys and control click to the box 0, and let's click on nest under active, just to make sure that the nesting is right. Let's get back to FreeCAD, and let's turn on these pencil holders. These are just cylinders, 15 and 10 millimeter diameters, and we have this pocket for the paper holder as well. So let's see how we can do this with CSDF. So let's grab this box and duplicate it. However, let's change it to be a cylinder, and the radius should be 7.5 millimeters, and let's grab the height to be like 40. Sorry. And then let's move this at the side and around here or so, and let's position it like so. And now let's duplicate this around the y-axis. Let's duplicate it another time. However, this time the radius should be 5 millimeters. Okay, let's shift the Y, shift the Y, and shift the Y. Okay, I am now pleased with this position. These positions are not precise. As far as I know, in the later versions of Conjure SDF are going to support the array things, so that is going to make things easier. But obviously, in CSDF, to be precise, it's a bit harder than in FreeCAD, because in FreeCAD you have to constrain everything. Okay, now let's duplicate this around the x-axis, and let's make the location, sorry, not that location, the y location should be 0, and let's make it a cube, and let's make it slightly wider. However, the width should be around 6, and we need to put this down a bit, and let's turn off the rotation, and yeah, I think something like this could work. I am not going to be precise with this one. Okay, back to FreeCAD now. Now what I did is to remove these pockets. We have some 45 millimeter width. This one has a slightly larger rounding than these ones. We have one longer one, and we have one that is somewhere in between. And we have yet another little pocket at the back. However, I modeled this separately because the depth of this is smaller than the depth of this guy. So how can we recreate this in Blender with CSDF? Let's duplicate this box again. Okay, it wasn't duplicated, so Shift D, X. Let's put it like so. Now the dimension should be 43, 30, and 88. However, the rounding has to be arranged, and for that let's make it a positive shape so you can see what I am doing. So the bevel, let's make it like, let's see how this looks with 0.1. This looks okay, maybe 0.08. Yeah, let's talk with that one. However, this bevel, it bevels the sides as well at the top and the bottom, which is not good. So let's duplicate this guy, and let's make it smaller, and we are going to turn off the bevel and increase the size a bit and make it a negative shape. So in this way I can have the side rounding, but I am not going to have the rounding at the bottom. And what I want to do is control select this box 6, and I would prefer to hit the Control P and manually set the parent to box 6. And also I would like to make sure that Conjure SDF follows this hierarchy. So I am going to click on Nest under Active. And now let's position this guy. Oh, sorry. Somewhere like so, and this box should be a negative shape as well. And we kind of have to move it down. And move it down so that roughly the center is at the top. In this way, roughly it's going to match what we have in FreeCAD and in reality. Let's move it down a bit. And let's select this box 7 as well. And let's duplicate it around the y-axis like so. And then duplicate it around the x-axis. And let's duplicate it around the x-axis too. And let's create another one at the y. Okay, this one has to be at 0 at the x-axis. Okay, so let's set some dimensions. So this one supposed to be around 86 millimeters. Sorry, 86. And also the bottom one should be a bit larger. And let's move it just a tad around the x-axis. This one, I would like to make sure that the rounding is a bit bigger. Let's see, around 12. Yeah, I kind of like this rounding here because this one's more rounded. And this bottom one should be 185 millimeters. And also I need to increase the size of this bottom guy here. And I think I like the position of this guy. I kind of have to align these guys to match this edge, which is a bit hard because CSDF doesn't have align tools. So I kind of have to make sure that this edge is parallel to this one. I guess this might work like so. Yeah, now that is okay. Now let's grab this last one and duplicate it around the y-axis. However, this guy supposed to be 135 millimeters. Let's move it like so. I am going to try to align these edges towards each other. Okay, I am liking this. However, this guy should be up like so. Maybe a bit down. Okay. Let's get back to FreeCAD and let's see how this continues. Now we are going to cut out triangular shape here just to make sure that the top of this section is angled. and we are rounding only these edges at the side. And the next step is to add thickness to this object. So how can we do this in CSDF? So now we are back in Blender. So let's shift again this box, turn off the bevel, and let's make the width 200. Let's make the location 0, and we need 150 millimeters here, and let's make it like 50 millimeters tall. However, we need the X rotation to be 15 degrees. And now let's move it aside and let's move it down such way that there is a little bit of an edge here or a rim here. I think I am liking this the way it turned out. The next step is to round these corners. The problem with this shape is that the corner has a larger bevel than the top and the bottom bevels. So we couldn't really use a normal bevel function. So let's grab a cylinder from here. Let's shift this around the x-axis and let's move this one at the very bottom. So let's for a second make it like a positive shape and let's increase the height a bit. And let's make sure that the rotation is 5 degrees at the x-axis and 5 degrees, or more precisely -5 degrees at the y-axis. Let's move it down a bit. And what I figured out is if I use this mode and the depth is 0.03 and rounding it, then it rounds a bit. To be honest, this is not the most ideal solution, but to be honest, I couldn't figure out a better way to run these corners differently than from the top and the bottom. So let's copy the y value here. Let's duplicate this, and the y value should be minus this, and the x rotation should be -5. And now we have to duplicate this, and the x should be minus this, and the y rotation 5. And also, let's duplicate it, and now the y location should be a positive value, and now the mm, no, the x rotation should be 5, and the y rotation should be 5 too. Yes, indeed. So I know that this is not perfect, but as I said, I couldn't really figure that any other way. Now, the tricky bit is let's grab this box, let's say, Shift D, Z, and let's clear the rotation and let's move it down. And let's unnest this guy. So let's select this box and let's set up a solidify include nested, a 0.01 thickness. However, nothing seems to happen. So let's grab this box and let's move it up and let's decrease the size. Let's center. And now, as you can see, the solidify is now magically happens. As I move this around, and also I could add a bit of bevel to this guy, which I am kind of liking, but let's make it smaller. But as you can see, it's kind of weird because it's like creates a window, so it's not as beautiful solidify as what we have in FreeCAD. You kind of have to be a bit tricky here. And also the bevel is not that great again. So I guess this is kind of a disadvantage here, that the solidify works but it's kind of weird. Now we are back in FreeCAD, so what we had to do next? We create all of the rest of the roundings. Like here and at the bottom and at the top here. And where else was this guy? Let's click on it and see. Okay, this is the paper holder pocket bevel. And we have another final one around here. I guess in FreeCAD this fillet was the hardest thing to do. I could only do 0.5 millimeter. So let's figure out how we can add these roundings. So here we are back in CSDF. Let's start to do the rounding. We did already one, or at least attempted one. So we have to round the top edges and the bottom edges of this basic shape. And the way we created this basic shape is subtracting these cubes. So if I add a blending here with 0.002 and copy it, as you can see, it nicely rounds the top and the bottom. So this is what we should do for all of these boxes. So it's kind of this rounding thing. You can do this along the way. You don't have to wait until you had finished the final shape. Here in the cylinders, we have to have two roundings. One is around the edges and one is around the bottom. The bottom rounding is determined by the bevel. Let's make it 0.02. Now you can see at the bottom here, there is some nice rounding. The top rounding is determined by this blending here. And now you have a nice rounding at the top. So let's do the same thing for the rest of these cylinders. So yet again, the philosophy is the same. You can do this while you are modeling. You don't have to finish. You don't have to wait until you finished. Okay, so whereas do we need some rounding? we need some rounding at the pocket holder. So yet again, the blending strength gives us some extra bevel, but this one could be a bit smaller as well. So now we have to have again two kinds of rounding. One is at the top and one is at the bottom. And what happens if we adding the rounding here? Now at least the bottom part is rounded, so let's turn this off because we don't need it. And why we don't have anything here? Because we are subtracting another box here, so the top rounding doesn't really visible. So let's add the bottom rounding then by oh, wrong thing. So let's add the bottom rounding, the next part, and the next. Okay, now we have to add another blending to this one because this is going to round all of these things that it's going to cut off. However, this doesn't round these edges because the rounding of these edges is determined by the bevel value here. So let's add some nice bevel, and I think this one is much nicer than in FreeCAD. Here is the finished pen holder with Blender and CSDF. Overall, I think the logic more or less the same, at least what kind of shape you have to add and subtract. But the main difference is that you cannot be too precise with CSDF. And the other thing is that the roundings, you can think of it along the way. You don't have to wait until you finish the whole thing and then add the roundings. You kind of you'd better add it along the way and adjust the rounding shapes. And also with CSDF, if you need different kind of rounding in a complex shape like this starting shape, we had to use 5 boxes to create that one. That might be an issue. But overall, I hope you can see the similarity of the thinking mechanism that going on when you're modeling with a CAD software and when you're modeling with CSDF. And I hope, at least for those who had used a CAD software before, it might be an easier switch to CSDF or in SDF modeling in general. So I hope you had enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, then please like and subscribe, and see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.